Hello everyone, my name is Steven and I'll be taking over Unofficial. In today's specific video, I'm going to be going over the Bluetooth project and those sample projects and going over a bit of details about it, how to get set up, how to get started, so that everyone watching this can know exactly what to do, how to get your controller paired, and how to get started, and some of the code functionalities for this. And so without further ado, let's get started. So as you can see here, what we have is a folder for the Hackman North Demo 1. This is a GitHub folder that I just set up. And inside this folder, it has nothing except for just the context folder, which Alessio already went over in the vibe coding video. And so inside this context folder is just all the sample projects available. And I set up a git ignore, which is just the DS store and the context folder to ignore that. And this my entire setup with the folder and my GitHub repository. And so going into the Lens Studio project in particular, we're going to go over the BLE project. So if you open up Lens Studio, try to be on 5.12.1 for this, or if you're watching this in the future, it could be a later version, but at the moment it's supported for 5.12.1. And you can click on Home, and then right here, there's a spectacles line. You can click on that, scroll down until you find the BLE project. And so finding the BLE GameController project, you can click on it, and it'll load up the entire BLE project for you. So just give it a second, and there you go. So now this project is loaded up, and this is the sample project we have for anything BLE controller related. So I'm saving this into the Half the North demo project, and boom, it's saved. And so if you go back here, you can see that I have a context folder and the BLE game controller, which has all the BLE game controller assets that we just imported from Lens Studio. Perfect. So now that we have this project set up, I will go over a little bit about the scene itself. So you have here just a camera. It's the basic camera for any Lens Studio Spectacles project. You have the Spectacles interaction kit, which is anything interaction related with your hands, buttons, everything of that sort. And then you have the SceneController, which is the specific part for this object. See, you have the SceneController, which basically controls the character itself. This does everything from the animation of the controller, calm those scripts, and the character controller to get it moving around. And you also have this ground, which we set at 0 so that the ground is flat and the character can move along the ground wherever you place it. And then the Specs character controller is about everything related to the movement, and it also contains the AnimationController for anything animation related. And so we can see here under preview that once we go over here, we can look down in this sample project. So as you go down, you can load, and once you pinch to confirm, you can press it, and both your Bitmoji character should appear. And so with this, you can hold down on the mouse button and drag around, and it will have different animations. So we can set it such that it's walking if it goes a certain speed, but if you drag it very far, then it starts to run around. And so this should be your Bitmoji character once you see it on the device. And so with that, let's actually go into our device now so that we can see it working on Spectacles, and I can go over how to pair your controller as well. And also a few other things is that whenever you want to pair to specs, just make sure you have a couple of things enabled if you're facing any issues. So one, make sure that this right here is this blue arrow here with the spectacles icon. That will show that it's connected via wire, and that's exactly what you need for this to work. In addition, make sure that once you go to project settings, experimental API is also on. That shouldn't be on by default, but just double check just to make sure it's on, just so that everything can work. And so once those are good, then you can feel free to press preview to Lens, and it'll now join your specs. It's now loaded onto my specs, and so I'm gonna swap over to my view, and you'll see what I'm seeing. And so you can see here, it says look below to place. And so you can go and pinch on the ground, and now you should see your character appear. And so there we go. This is the actual Alessio's Bitmoji, and so you can see it's whichever Bitmoji you set up, you will actually see it live in front of you. And so with that, we're going to get started with hand controller now. And now I have my Xbox controller in front of me. And with that, we're going to try to pair it once you're in the game by going and holding down that Xbox controller, and it'll start blinking. Your first time, it won't be paired to your specific glasses, and so you will have to hold down this button. And so once you hold down for an X amount of time, you'll see it starts to blink faster, and that's when you can let go. And with the stealth ability, that means it's now connected to your spectacles. Right now, as you can see, it's now moving around, and each time you touch a certain button, it does a different actions. That's joking, that's kicking, why it actually rumbles the controller and needs to vibrate, S is punching. And so you can see this is exactly how it should work out specs. And so I hope you all enjoyed that little demo on specs. And so now we're going to go over the project itself and all the key aspects that you may need. In the lens video, you can see here that there's two very important scripts that you need to know, the AnimationController and SceneController. You can think of the AnimationController as controlling anything related to the animation. So as you get change the animation, the Bitmoji character at all, and this is where you need to be. As for the SceneController, this is what we're going to go into first. And so the SceneController itself is basically the game manager, where it dictates everything relating to the character. And so the character manager in particular. And so it deals with spawning the character itself and mapping the buttons on the controller, which is very important for doing specific actions. And that's what we're going to go over in this specific tutorial. And so as a brief overview, you're basically getting access to this character controller, which does everything related to the movement of the character, the rigid body, the colliders, and there's multiple documentation of talking about what the character controller does. And then there's also the game controller, which is a specific express controller that you have access to, and the CharacterController placement controller, which is a thing that will be giving in order to place down the specific character at the spot that you want. And then the ButtonStateKey is where you can see every single state being called. And so if you go into it, you can see every single button that you can press on the controller is here. And so if you want to call that A button, B button, X, Y, etc., then you can call that here with the ButtonStateKey. And I'll go over that there shortly. And so looking back at the SceneController, you have all this code that basically dictates the character controller getting the animation controller and the camera of the scene. And the most important part in order to learn is one, this editor test that's able to say, hey, whenever you tap the screen, which is this preview itself, so whenever you tap it, you're actually jumping. And that's what this does. Where on top of that, this .jump button is set to true, which means you're jumping now. And then on start, you're starting the placement, which is the yellow object that you see here, which basically begins to say, hey, where am I going to place my Bitmoji character? And you can tap on it in order to place down my Bitmoji character. And then you can also do a create other update loop. And so whenever you start off the experience as a whole, you are going to be standing for any potential controllers. And so this will continuously stand until a controller is being connected. And so that's why this is so important in order to actually parent it once you start. So you'll have time to parent, and once you parent, and it will no longer stand for a controller. And so once your controller stand and it's plugged into the or it's scanned and connected to the space, then it's going to be listening for a button that you press. And so now we're going to go over how to register for a button press. And so you can see here that for the buttons itself, is that once you press the A button, you can see here that that jumps. Or if you press the X button, then that basically will crunch. And so you're playing the specific animations for when you press a certain button. And so with this, if you want to, let's say, press a new button, this would be how you can do so. First, you would need to make a new function here. And let's call this private left joystick press. And so, or down, left joystick down. And then you can copy that and if press, then print I quit the left joystick. And so with this, we can then go ahead and both. And then this game controller, so asking for game controller and whether a button was changed, which was carries with a left click. Then you can go ahead and call the left joystick down bind to it, which means it will bind this function to whatever you press the left click, which is the left joystick, which in particular is going to be this button. And so don't mind the error there. This should be valid code. As you can see, it prints. And see, that's exactly how you would do it. We're going to test it on device now. And so you can go ahead and press preview to lens again. I'm on the specs again, and I have the controller paired with it. And whenever I press down on the left joystick, you should see another log here stating that I pressed down on the left joystick. And both, you can see here, see anytime I pressed on it, this number is going up right again. And so this is saying that I quit the left joystick. With that, we've shown that now you can indeed change the left joystick in order to do a certain action. And so you can imagine here that now whenever you press the left joystick, you can do another thing. Whether it's playing another animation, spawning an object, etc., you can do whatever you want with this specific thing. And you can also do it for any other button as well by just changing this button state key to any of these other states that's possible in the controller. And now just finishing up with the rest of the code on the SceneController script is that everything here is now related to the button itself, or a placement of the Bitmoji character at the start itself. This code shouldn't really be changed, as this is just how you spot the Bitmoji character at the spot that you want and setting that well position accordingly. But if you need to change anything, feel free. And then aside from that, this is just an update loop that runs every single frame, explaining exactly what to do when a button is pressed, such as the movement with the direction of the joystick. And so this is exactly how the code is structured for moving the character and having the button presses. And then if we move on to the animation controller itself, this is just playing any animation. So if you want to change it out, you can add in a new animation here. And then there's going to be a specific video that you can watch explaining exactly how to add in animations. Or we're going to link that in the description of this video that you can view. And so it lets you add in your animation to the scene itself. Then you can add it as an input, which means it will appear in the inspector and you can drag it in. Then you can also add in the clip as well. And this is how you play the animation. So you basically are able to play the animation anytime you call these specific functions here. So the jump, kick, and punch respectively. And you can either play the animation once and it will play the full animation unless something is interrupted. Or you can also create a loop clip, which will basically be like the idle, walk, or run animations that will play forever as long as a certain action is done without another key press overriding it. And so that's how this specific animation controller is structured, and you can use it as you wish in order to make any animation that you want and import it into the character. And so once you do a new animation, you can start the SceneController to accept a new input like the left joystick. And when you press it, you can also play a certain animation or make the controller rumble or anything of that sort. And so I hope that makes sense, and good luck with everything that you're up to for the Zach.
What's up guys, so here's Alessio again. This is the second part of this tutorial for BLE GameController setup. Steven did an incredible job trying to showing you every little detail of how to set up GameController with spectacles. That's incredible. Now I'm gonna pretend just to be like you, a hacker here trying to figure things out and just modifying this sample, trying to do something slightly different but still on the same line of what Steven did. I just wanted to mention, if you arrived to this video just now, the context here is that next week we're participating to Hack the North, which is the greatest hackathon in Canada, and we are trying really to see the potential here for GameController and BLE. So we have these multiple samples, multiple templates for you to try. We will be able to connect spectacles and the GameController from Xbox, and you will be able to just build your application. We hope that this video inspire you and give you all the tools really for doing anything you would like. So without further ado, like always, let's go into the details and just let's see how to do this. Here, you will be familiar with this project because it's the one that Steven went through. And I just want to start again from here because our modifications are going to be starting really from here. So this samples is very simple. You're going to pinch to confirm, and then your avatar, your Bitmoji is going to be instantiated. Steven went through all of it, so I'm not going to just repeat myself. All I want to mention here is just look at the structure of this project. The structure of this project is very modular. We have a SceneController. Then we have a CharacterController, which also has attached the Bitmoji because the Bitmoji is the character that we're controlling. And then we have an AnimationController, which gets as an input in the inspector all of the animations that are part of this model that we are importing. In this case, Bitmoji 3D is a very particular model, right? Because it's something that is downloaded directly from the Snapchat server, and it's based on your account, is going to be part of your application. This is a very handy way to get this model, even if what I want to go through is a slightly different flow that maybe is more familiar for people like you trying to build application where you have custom models, or maybe you happen to go to on Sketchfab or other similar website just to find models, and then with those animated models just trying to do your own thing. If I were you, probably that would be the first thing I would ask myself. Bitmoji, that's great, but what if I want to import my custom model, my custom animation, and map everything to my new model? So that's exactly what we will do here. I wonder if you would like to build something like that. We wanted to give you just a starter point to do it and save you maybe so much enough time, right? So here, the project is very similar as what we had before. We had the same way, instantiate, drone, and then we can pilot it around and do everything we want to do. Once again, we have the SceneController, which now became the VehicleSceneController. And we have the same references here. So we have the object visual for toggling my visual parent when we are instantiated with the surface placement. Then we have a vehicle controller, which is a new controller, which does exactly the same things, but for vehicles. So the main difference between the previous controller and this controller is that we are dealing a lot differently with physics. Usually for characters, you really need some sort of gravity because let's say if you're jumping up, you need to come down again, or maybe you're hitting some walls and stuff like that. Here, actually, we are bypassing that behavior, that physics constraint. In a way, we're actually simplifying things, and we allow basically the drone to be flying. That directionality actually is very similar again. Main difference is that we don't have just left, right, front and back, but we also have up and down for just let the drone just going up and down. So we have the vehicle, animation controller, and then camera like before, and then we go in the vehicle controller. I don't think in this hackathon particularly you will have the time to create a new controller. So I would just that's why we actually did it for you. And if you are interested, maybe in a second time, you can deep dive into that controller package. And this time, we're not taking in all of those animation that the character has. There was like punch, jump, etc. We just have a hover animation, which is just this kind of looping animation for the drone when he's flying. So just if you want to do something like that, we were thinking maybe we just provide them something similar so they can get started with. Then we have our drone model, which I downloaded from Sketchfab, and I will also, of course, reference all of the credit in the description below because it was a free download, and I like to credit the artist. And then here, usually when you import models that you are getting from those websites, these models comes as a prefab, and this prefab has already a bunch of animation. Usually what you find is this kind of structure. You find prefab, which is a drone that you are trying to modify, and you can drag and drop in your scene. And then usually you have animations that in this case are not using the taking off and land. And then we have materials here, and then meshes, and then the texture. Something you might expect is that probably when you import things to Lens Studio, materials won't be ported perfectly. There is a chance that some properties are lost. So what happens is that you need to create a new material. In this case, I created a new material here. Let me reference it. So actually, this is the material. I referenced a texture, which I also modified myself. So I got the real texture from the original asset, and then I modified some color, and I applied, of course, the snap logo on top of the drone. So that's a pretty common process if you're used to Unity. That's really similar. And once you have everything, the first thing you want to do is turning off any automatic import of animation players. Usually what Lens Studio does, equally from other game engines, is that it imports everything and then it auto-plays all of the animation that are available on this model. But you want to turn it off, and then you probably want to handle the animation actually with the AnimationController. Notice this scene is very similar to what we saw before. We have the SceneController, which is now the VehicleSceneController, and then we have, instead of the CharacterController, something called VehicleController, which comes for free for you. And then we have the VehicleAnimationController, which is the animation controller that before was the only animation controller for the character. So there are these 2 or 3 scripts that basically are just doing all what you need. So without further ado, let's say, for example, you want to modify some things. This is my setup to work, by the way. I also wanted to share this before to go in details regarding script that you need to modify. I also want to recommend you to create 2 folders here. One is called context, and one is the project that includes your project. And in the context folder, if you're used to use things like Cursor, Windsurf, or GitHub Copilot, or other similar product, I highly recommend you to really have a context folder where you can just drop all of the things that can help you really through your flow or trying to modify these samples and creating something new. In this case, I actually included inside of the project a docs folder which has 3 of the main documentation that you need for actually going through this exercise. The first one is the animation controller, so it's like animating things. So if we go online, basically what I added you there is just this page and then some API documentation reference. So basically that's what I added there in a markdown format. Then I added the animation controller. Then I added the Bluetooth API documentation. Then I added the remote service gateway documentation if you want to start blending things together. So these docs are just like a mini context that you have in your project. But what I highly recommend for you is having actually a context folder where you drag and drop in at least our spectacle sample project, where you have a lot of material to play with, especially samples that includes how to use 3D generation, which is also a main core topic of this hackathon. So in this case, for example, you might take a look at these two projects, Agenti Playground and AI Playground. And then there is another project which I always recommend, which is called Essential. That contains all of the most basic and common pattern for doing application in Lens Studios. And also I have the BLE GameController reference, which is the project that Steven just showed you in our previous part of the video. Just so you know, this is usually my setup when I do things. You also notice that I have a Cloud file here at the top. That's because I like to use Cloud Code sometimes on my own when I do stuff. Cloud Code allows you to do something that is like Flash init at the beginning of the project. And when you do that, it can index all your file, understand things, and tries to have a very much of a homogeneous view of your project. By the way, all of these informations, I'm just quoting them very quickly, but I also have a tutorial about this sort of vibe coding with Lens Studio. So if you want to take a look, of course, I would leave it down in the description below with all of the resources that I'm mentioning. And during the hackathon, if you're a hacker, you will be provided with an overwhelming quantity of resources, so don't worry at all. So we have our context folder, we have our projects folder, this is our new project, we have some documentation as well in our project, and now let's take a look at what I was mentioning before. So for the scripts, you have two scripts here. The most important one, looking at the game controller mapping, is the scene controller. The scene controller on start to map stuff for you. So really like going to the, let's say, to the most important part that you will be probably modifying in this very short amount of time that this hackathon is going to be probably here. Because here, these are all of the inputs that are mapped to the game controller. In this case, what I did was changing what we had before and not having jumping, for example. I still have send rumble, which is the sending the vibration. But look what I have in here. I have actually for the button X, I have something called emergency land. So we just land right away the drone. Let me see what we have here. ButtonStateKey over button. I don't think, oh, this is actually the jump that I was mentioning before. This is the button A. So if we take a look at the controller, if I have here, the button is this one here. So button A is going to be the one that you need to hold to fly. And then I have two other buttons here, which I add for the very cool flip animation, which are the RT and LT and BT. So these two buttons here in the back of the joystick. So when you push those, these two methods are called. So on flip right button, this is an animation, which is condensed in a unique method called startFlip. And then this is the flipping method, which is just really just geometry. It's not doing anything with the existing animation of the model. It's just basically applying a flip rotation in Lens Studio directly. So you're not limited to animation that you find on the model. If you want to do something cooler because that is missing or something that you don't find, I found also this example a good way to inspire you to make. So if that's not available on the model itself, I'm not going to stop myself here. I'm just going to try to do something myself. Then something also important here is simulating things in Lens Studio. You notice that there are all of these events like touch start, touch end, tap event, and all of these things. This is really helpful if you are in Lens Studio because it allows you to simulate things. For example, in this case, I'm holding, then whenever I'm releasing, the drone is coming down. Then when I'm going directionalities, when I'm going in certain direction, also that is doing the thing. And when flip is a little bit hard to simulate, but what you can do is just simulate it during a wake, or just so it's very easy to build things in Lens Studio. It takes literally 2 seconds to send the lenses to your device. So my highest recommendation is really just trying to build and see if it works. If you think that things are okay in the editor, probably it works also on device. You notice that in the vehicle controller, we have different stuff. We have the move speed, sprint speed, acceleration. This remains the same, but then we have also something kind of flight control. We have this section, which is of course for our drone, so vehicle controller. And so we added a lot of different vertical speed, vertical acceleration, and then you will start tuning all of these numbers and do your own thing. But really, the most important part that you need to know is that scene script, which I just showed before. So let's go back in cursor, and this main scene is the one that you will need to modify. Then I want to spend also just a moment to the animation controller. The animation controller gets animation clips and then it plays it with the private animation player. When you see private animation player, this can also be done without script. So it's basically this component here, which I'm just invoking and creating privately instead of having it exposed on the inspector. So something else you also could do is having an input scene, like a public input scene a public input on your inspector, and then when you have that public input on the inspector, you just drag and drop physically your animation player in that input and just use it. Then we are getting some animation clips array, and then with those animation clip, we're just like say, so let's set it and let's play this with this animation player. Let's play clip, and then we play the clip name, which is in this case, oh, sorry about that. We play the clip that we have it here, and the clip is actually here. It's because the animation play clip works with a string, but we have the reference of the animation clip here in the beginning. We are not using this because I'm not actually playing a single animation. We are also playing a looping animation. So this is something that you have there and you can just use, and it's ready for you. If you have other very cool animation, I think the most common thing I would get away from this example is, so I have this SceneController. So let's go in the SceneController, and I have all of these events here, right? If you just like do this and you just delete the X, you just do dot, and then you will see that you have all of these comments that you can map. So if you have more animation in your ported FBX or other format GLB from Sketchfab, for example, and that model has like 4 or 5 animations, you can just say, so whenever I press D down, this is the animation I want to play. If I play D left, this is the other animation, and things can get really complex in that sense. But this is a starting example for you, so it's already ready for you. You can find it in the description below of the video, and you're ready to go. I hope that this tutorial was helpful to get you started on the BLE controller, whether you're part of this hackathon or not. This is all material that is available for you from today. And if I were part of this hackathon, I think I will look into things like how to go beyond my application, my remote control of this virtual object. For example, something I would do, I would love to use my drone as a start point for certain raycasts that are raycasting actually the real world. And so taking advantage of the world query model, I would start raycasting in certain direction and make use of those hit points for doing something else that could be part of my game, or could be part maybe of an inspection lens that wants to just remember certain part of the environment that I'm just inspecting. And I would see what are the limitations that I hit, and from there I would see what actually comes out. I like also to start hackathons not having a very defined idea, but just start to explore the medium and just see what happens when I just get into the details. So once again, thank you again for following this tutorial. Can't wait to see what you build, and peace, and see you next time.